welcome to episode 263 of Late Night Linux. I'm Joe, and with me are Faden.
Ahoy.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Let's get straight on with our discoveries then. Graham, what is Nabu Casa?
I've been updating my Home Assistant setup over the last couple of weeks. One of the problems that I've kind of ignored, and I'm sorry, I have Nest thermostats here.
Boo!
I had them before Google bought them. Hate myself.
You should.
For a long time, the API was open, and then I think we talked about it. Google closed down their old style authentication that they inherited from Nest. And long story short, I always access my Home Assistant through a VPN. I wasn't prepared to expose ports on my home network with Home Assistant, and also to set up the certificates that it needs, the Let's Encrypt certificates that I'd need for the devices running in my house that I wanted to expose, which is what I'd need to do for Google Nest integration, and also quite a few other kind of endpoints that I might want to use. I also didn't want to host Home Assistant outside of my home network. I quite like the fact that it's running here. Nabu Casa is a project that was started by the original Home Assistant developers, and it's a subscription service that forwards on your Home Assistant front-end portal and all the API calls basically to your Home Assistant instance directly, internally to Home Assistant. It's built into Home Assistant. I think it's $7.99 a month in dollars and pounds, and a bit cheaper in euros, and 10 times that, I think, if you want to pay an annual subscription, and there's a month's free demo. I'm not endorsed by them at all, but it's just a one click. You enable it in your Home Assistant instance, and now you've got Let's Encrypt. You've also got an online portal to access your Home Assistant, and everything is forwarded securely to your own instance. And they also support your own domain name. So if you happen to own some, I don't know, Mucky JPEG's domain name or something, and you want it to be home.muckyjpegs.com, you can do that and make that your Home Assistant portal. And I trust it. It worked faultlessly. I got the Nest integration working through HTTPS and forwarding through Nabu Casa. It didn't take that much time. And actually, I hate subscriptions, but I feel really good about this because part of the money also goes back to Home Assistant and in funding Home Assistant development.
Very interesting. I've looked at this before and thought that £7 a month seemed a little bit too expensive for the value that I would get out of it. My primary use case would be the Alexa integration, so that I could use that device, which I will not say the name of again, in order to command the stuff around my house. I do that with a Node-RED extension, which I subscribe to, the Pro plan there, but I think it's maybe a couple of quid, maybe $1 a month or something. It's pretty cheap. But I would quite like to rationalize everything into a single platform, but it just felt like it was too much money. But you're saying that it all just works, it's dead simple, and it therefore could well be worth my money.
Yeah, and it helps support the project as well. I mean, I haven't looked into it too much. They say it does. The community say it does. They use the money to host the community and you know, do it without having advertising. So it's almost worth it just for that alone if you use Home Assistant, I think.
Will, Llama-File.
Llama-File is quite extraordinary. It is an AI bullshit which runs Llama LLMs.
Right, I've muted Faden then.
You can download an executable which will run on Windows or Linux or Mac or BSD. You can just download a single file, which is typically tens of gigabytes in size, but not really that massive.
Not when you've got gigabit symmetrical.
No, have I ever told you about my internet connection?
You might have come across it once or twice, yeah.
So it doesn't take a massive amount of time. For example, the Wizard Coder Python 13b model is 7.3 gig for the whole thing, which is quite impressive. You download this file, you make it executable, you run it. In some cases, there's a web UI. You go to like localhost :8080, and there's a box, and you type in your questions, and it talks back to you. The Wizard Coder one, you have to pass it like C code, uncompiled in the command line in order to ask it questions. If you just run it, well, mine just started going on about bowel cancer, so I just kind of quit out of that and tried something else.
Unprompted bowel cancer, was it?
Yeah,
Lovely.
yeah. So I tried the Mistral 7B one, which I think is like the default one, and it gives you a web interface, and you can just ask it questions. And I asked it some questions, and I asked it two significant questions. One was, why did Python switch from print being a statement to a function? And it gave a very logical, straightforward answer. And I asked it if it knew about late night Linux, to which it said, yes, it did. And that it was a Linux podcast, a weekly podcast run by two ladies. And then that was the end of that. But the real amazing thing here is that I could download from the internet a single file and execute it, and it just worked on my normal laptop. And I could sit there tapping in questions and it was giving answers. It's quite extraordinary.
Hang on. It was giving answers. Well, you didn't specify any of them were correct.
50% of them were correct.
Hang on, that Python one, do we even know if that was correct? It just sounded plausible.
Yeah, it sounded. So that's the half the battle, really. At this point, I don't really care about the quality of the answer it's giving me. What I care about is the portability of being able to put these LLMs in a relatively small container, which are executable across multiple platforms. The correctness, that can come later. This is the real challenge here, making it usable by normal people.
I can spout bullshit in almost no K, so I don't see why that's fucking a feature.
You raise a fair point. But I would say give it a go. Honestly, give it a go. Follow the quick start guide. Within 30, well, okay, depends on your internet connection. Within a few minutes, you will be running an LLM model on your machine, which you can interact with without sending data to the internet. It's quite extraordinary. I think you should try it.
I think it's very cool, Will. Thanks for bringing this up. I mean, imagine if all the companies or startups who want to mess around with LLM via the online APIs start using something like this. It will help us all get even better answers, Phelim.
Mm-hmm. Phelim, what is OverTheWire?
So, first caveat is I haven't done much because I ran out of time for the last 2 weeks. I was working on a project, but it is a hacker sort of inverted commas game. And the idea is you test out your skills. Now, they start off super simple in the bandit level is what they start off with, where you're SSHing into a server, catting a file, and then next time you try to do it, it's a dash is the file name. So you have to work out how to do a cat of the dash file. And it continues on. There's about 30 levels of that first game, but there's many, many of them. And the idea is to try and encourage people to understand how to hack into systems or how to extract info from various servers in different ways and learn various shell skills. And it's quite cool. Interesting idea. Now, obviously, I haven't tried it that much. Didn't have enough time. I'm going to do it over the next couple of weeks if I've got a bit of spare time here and there. And I just thought it might be a bit of a laugh for people to try out. Starts off super basic, but there's a hierarchy of how you do it. And the various games start on various different levels. Like anybody who knows what they're doing, Bandit is probably a bit too easy. But there's probably still stuff in there to catch you out. So I thought it was quite fun. Give people a different view of looking at servers and how to get into them and learn various bits and pieces.
How do you get onto this thing?
It is an SSH server. So, for instance, as far as I got in the bit of time I had was you SSH into the server, they give you the details, and they say you need to get the info for the next level by getting the info out of this file. And, start off as just cat a readme file. Next time we go around, you log back in as a different user into the server as Bandit1, previously being Bandit0, and the next file is a dash, and you have to, how do I get a dash? And cat the dash file. And, obviously because that's part of a user input for an option in a file, it makes it tricky to get to. So you'd ./dash, whatever. And things like that. So it's quite cool. And then it continues on that way. Now, the thing is, I didn't have enough time to try it out all the way, but I just thought if people want to give it a go or throw them some money to help people out learn, yeah, it's a valuable project, I think.
I'm in.
Don't get distracted. We're supposed to be recorded here.
Do it.
I've mentioned before my quest to get a decent experience on a big 4K TV, and I was determined to do that with a proper x86 Linux box. Well, I finally just cracked. It was Black Friday. The Fire TV Stick 4K Max was 55 quid, I think. And so I just thought, right, I'm going to buy this and plug it into the TV and see how it goes. I probably won't use it much, but, it's only 55 quid, whatever. And it's fucking brilliant. And the reason it's brilliant is, you've got your official apps, like iPlayer, which is nice to have and have a reasonable resolution, although not 4K seemingly. When I got right up close to the telly, it was a bit blurry and not that good. But what has really made the experience good is that you can install some open source applications on it. VLC, Jellyfin. So I got my little Wise box, got a Jellyfin server going on that, and streamed it to the telly, no problem. Even some pretty hardcore 4K shit, which I actually had to change the settings to be original quality, so it wasn't trying to transcode it. Although it should be able to transcode it. I'm not sure why it didn't. But anyway, so that worked perfectly. But VLC, and this goes for all platforms, a lot of people don't know this. VLC will play local media no problem most of the time. But you can also play stuff from the network. I mean, Videolan is the company that makes it.
Yeah.
And streaming stuff is its bread and butter. And so you just go into browse and you can find, in my case, the Samba server and just browse through all of the files, all of my DVD rips and whatnot, and just start playing it, no problem. And apart from a little bit of skipped frames in iPlayer and a bit of lag with Bluetooth, it's pretty much a flawless experience, I would say.
Are you not worried about the fact that Amazon is going to move away from wherever they are right now to their own thing?
Well, it's funny, right? I was editing the conversation we had about that, and Will was saying about how, yeah, it's going to suck when they move away from it, and it's not going to be Android. You know, you're not going to be able to sideload stuff. And I thought, life is too short to worry about tomorrow. Let's worry about today. Right now, it's on Black Friday sale. Let's just fucking buy this thing and see what it's like. And yeah, in future, I'll have to find another solution, but that'll be fun finding another solution. Right now, I'm going to use this Fire Stick and be happy in the moment.
You are a millennial, though, so I mean, that is on brand.
I'm a Zennial. We've been over this.
You are a millennial that is in denial, is what you are.
No, I'm a geriatric millennial or something.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're still a millennial. Still a millennial.
Whatever. But yeah, I'm not thrilled about having an Amazon fucking spying device on my network. But again, life is too fucking short, man. I just want to watch the football, you know what I mean, in good quality.
Will's got some D-Shark commands for you to run on that.
Well, I'm with you, Joe. I think that the ease of use and the value for money really is unbeatable. And if you have to sideload a few apps and you can use it for the next couple of years, I still think you've got value for money.
Yeah, and sideloading is still possible. You can get this thing called Loader or Downloader or something. And I got a YouTube client that is just YouTube Premium, basically for free with no ads. Because I tried to sideload NewPipe. I thought, this is Android, NewPipe. That's what I use on my phone and tablets and stuff. It's going to be great. Well, no, the UI is not made for a big telly and a remote control. And it was just a bit of a shit experience. So I asked Chris from Linux After Dark, and he recommended SmartTube, which is smarttubeapp.github.io. And fuck knows how long that's going to last. But again, living in the moment. Right now, it works brilliantly. Basically as well or better than NewPipe on my phone. So if you've got any sort of Fire Stick, I highly recommend that SmartTube app. Is this really upsetting you, Fahim?
No, look, they're all proprietary media networks and stuff. And, you know, if you can take advantage of Bezos and lose him a few cash because you're not using Prime streaming services, then that's cool. But, like, I do worry that we're all getting wrapped up in so many devices that we're not going to get on there. And I just hope that we can still, like, keep a decent open foothold in it all.
Yeah. I mean, I considered using the Pi 5 for this, and I might try it. But for now, I just want to have a good experience on this TV. Everything I've tried basically amounts to I have to set it to 1080p for it to work smoothly.
It's really annoying, though. Like, if you want to do things legally, it's painful. It is really painful, this type of stuff.
Well, if you want to do things legally and not buy the proper devices to do it with, you know, if you want to just pay for Disney, Netflix and all the rest of it, just get a Fire Stick or one of the others, a Roku, whatever, sign in, have a completely flawless experience. But if you want to use those services on a Linux box, not so much.
Assuming those things are there and available to you in your country, and they're not necessarily going to be.
Really?
Not necessarily. There's not everything everywhere. Well, like, we've got Netflix and Prime, and we use a PS5 to do it. So it's like all the proprietary junk gets shoved onto it. And
yeah,
routinely, a film that you were watching that used to be there is now gone. Like, I had watched Sicario, really enjoyed it. Was watching Sicario 2. Had only got about 20 to 30 minutes into it whilst watching it on Netflix. Totally got distracted. Month later, came back to look for it. Gone. Fucking brilliant. Cheers. How do I watch that then? I can't.
Yeah, and they wonder why people resort to the high seas.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is ridiculous. It's like, give me a reasonable option to pay for it legally. And yes, it's not the Stallman way of doing things, but I mean, there's realities to it all. You can either do it illegally or not have it. And, I'd rather have it.
Well, for me, it's more about the applications rather than the platform. As long as I can run VLC and Jellyfin, I'm not massively bothered because it feels like an appliance, which feels weird because I'd never do that on a desktop. I'd never be like, oh, well, I'll just use Windows or Mac OS. I'd always use Linux if I could, but I suppose that's the problem. I can't use Linux effectively at 4K. It just doesn't want to work properly. And it's almost certainly my error. I could spend ages making it all work with the right hardware acceleration and everything. But you just buy one of these, plug it in, and you're just off to the races. Or in my case, off to the football pitch. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Tailscale. Go to tailscale.com/LNL. Tailscale is an easy-to-deploy, zero-config, no-fuss VPN that allows you to build simple networks across complex infrastructure. Tailscale is a super easy way to connect devices and services to each other wherever they are. Transform networking and security with a modernized set of solutions built on revolutionary protocols designed for today's mobile and multi-cloud era. With Tailscale, you get the benefits of WireGuard without the hassle of manually configuring it. Amalith from Linux DevTime uses Tailscale to access all his machines over the network. It's things like being able to cancel a 3D print that's turning into spaghetti from anywhere, so it's slightly less of a disaster when he gets home, that made him call Tailscale a genuine game changer. So support the show and go to tailscale.com/LNL and try Tailscale out for free for up to 100 devices and 3 users with no credit card required. That's tailscale.com/LNL. On to a bit of admin then. First of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an ad-free feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to get in contact, you can email show@latenightlinux.com. Faden, you've got one from a listener on Mastodon.
Yeah, so Mehdi recommended Oh My Bash when I was complaining about Oh My ZSH, whatever we wanted to call it.
Oh My Sersha.
Yes, exactly. So Oh My Bash is for old school people who know what's good for them and still use Bash. And this is essentially all of those nice themes and plugins, but for Bash. And I did try it out. I only tried it out in a VM because I have a load of cruft in my Bash RC that I'd have to go through before I could get it to work properly. But it is a very simple script that you download, and definitely don't pipe into curl. In fact, actually, this one doesn't go into curl. They run it as a separate command shell in Bash, which I thought was quite nice of them. But yeah, you download that, run it, and then there's a lot of... it replaces your Bash RC file. And in there, there's various variables that you can adjust yourself. And one of them is the theme. And to be quite honest, the theme is the one I tried the most. And some stuff in there is quite nice. I bemoan the fact that a lot of them seem to think that you don't need to know your working directory that you're in right now. They seem to go ... and then just the last or second last part of that directory, which drives me mad because I need to know where I actually am.
Just PWD, it's fine.
If I'm PWDing every time I'm fucking doing something, I might as well just have it in the fucking list that's there.
Yeah.
But honestly, some of them were really nicely done, and you just go, damn, I wish it was by default like that. So quite nice, and it's obviously got a whole lot of plugins. The Git one, I think, was about the only one I really had any use for at the time. It uses PyEnv as well, but I don't use that. I use some of the old virtualenv stuff, so I didn't get any use out of that one yet. But I'm going to try out some various plugins on it. And it's really cool. Yeah, there's about 70 themes, apparently, so lots to choose from.
Yeah, and they say 24 plus plugins. And the tagline for this seems to be, your terminal never felt this good before.
Yeah. Some of the plugins are like Ansible, AWS. There's a whole load of stuff in there. I think Brew, that's the Mac one, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's cross-platform, so there's various stuff in there, like NPM, and the JavaScript stuff is in there too, and Kubernetes and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, so you don't need a fancy shell then?
You do not. You just need all these fancy plugins, and you'll be grand.
Side note, the website of the developer of this, of Oh My Bash, his personal website is like a shell, and you interact with it and type stuff in to get the pages up. It's quite a lot of fun. So if you're not going to download Oh My Bash, I think you should still check out his website.
What? Where?
There's a link in the footer there.
Oh, see it now. Yeah, you're right. ls-l not found. Oh, oh, menu.
Yeah,
right.
ls command not found. Yeah, come on.
Well, geez, I thought he'd implemented an entire operating system. What is this? Some sort of joke? No, this is actually quite cool.
It's funny that you do a -L, whereas I do an LL by default. Because in Ubuntu it's aliased, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's even aliased in mine. I just never do it. That is very cool.
Let's do some feedback then. Justin says, I was wondering who your host is and if there are some friendly FOSS or open source hosting providers. I'm wanting to start a podcast and wondering if you can recommend a hosting provider. Well, we just use a VPS on Linode, and the media, the MP3s, are hosted with Libsyn. And it really depends. If you want to start a podcast, there's proper easy turnkey solutions like Fireside's one, and Spotify have got one as well, where they'll just take care of everything for you. Yeah, boo, exactly. But if you want something you're in control of, then either you can try and find some sort of Hugo thing like Castanet, or just the classic WordPress and plugin combination like we do. I don't know, really. It depends how involved you want to get with it. I mean, Graham, what did you used to do when you used to have your own show?
Well, at Future, we did have the kind of infrastructure. At least we ran our own Ubuntu servers. I mean, it was Ubuntu 18.04 on that for a long, long time, and it wouldn't. I don't think it is recently, but until a few years ago, it was.
I thought you were going to say 804 because it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I was thinking that was exactly the same thing.
I think it might have been. You're right. I'm just forgetting. I think you're right. It must have been 804. And with Linux Voice, we had sponsored hosting, I think, which is generously provided by Bytemark. I actually wanted to ask you can you share anything about bandwidth, Joe? What the expectations might be on how much would be downloaded, the demand put on your host?
Well, that's the thing. I would advise if you're going to have any sort of popular show, don't host the media, the MP3s, where you host the website and the RSS feeds. You want to offload that to someone else, ideally a CDN. And there's a few different CDNs, but Libsyn is like one of the earliest podcast ones. And the pricing's weird. They charge you, I think, $15, $20 a month, whatever, and they have different plans. And you get a certain number of megabytes per month. And that's how much you can add to the account. But then it keeps all of your archived stuff. So I think this show has been on Libsyn for 4 or 5 years now. And it means if I ever stop paying for it, then they just delete it all and we're knackered. But if I keep paying the $20 a month, I can add a few hundred megabytes of new shows to it before they get archived at the end of the month. So it's a bit of a weird sort of pricing model, but it seems to work. And I've never heard any complaints since we switched to them in terms of speed. Whenever I download it, it's super fast. So I would highly recommend not having your media on the same box as the RSS feed and the website. Because you used to do that, didn't you? But then you had to put Cloudflare in front of it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But actually, Cloudflare came when the stories got on Hacker News rather than the podcast. Maybe that was the popularity of the podcast failing. But
yeah. But essentially, to do a podcast, you need an RSS feed and you need somewhere to host the media. And if it's going to be just like, a few friends and your mum listening, then just stick it on a $5 VPS. Not a problem. But if it's going to be beyond a few thousand people listening, then your VPS is just going to get hammered every time you release a new episode. If the media is on there, if it's just the RSS feed, then it doesn't really matter. And the RSS feed will often go hand in hand with the website. So if you do a WordPress site, for example, you'll get RSS more or less for free. Although you can use plugins like the Blueberry PowerPress plugin, which makes it really easy and like iTunes compliant or Apple Podcast compliant. So it's a bit complicated, really. But if you're just starting out and not that technical, although I would imagine most of the people listening are quite technical, but if you're not, then I would advise just go for a turnkey solution where they just take care of all of it for you. You just upload your files to them and they've got their own CDN that's probably just AWS ultimately. And they create the website and RSS feed and everything for you. And you just worry about making the actual show. But if you are technical, then the easiest way is probably WordPress, or I think some of the other, I think Ghost has got some podcast plugins as well. I don't know. It's just like everything in Linux and software. There's a million ways to do it.
Hosting files directly in S3 is a pretty cost-effective way of serving to a lot of people. But then you've got to take care of keeping it all up to date and so on and so on. But it's still a pretty cheap way of not having to deal with CDNs and that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, you can do that with the website as well if you have a static site generator like Hugo. If you don't have to worry about PHP and stuff and MySQL or Maria, whatever, then yeah, you can just create the HTML website. And that's what they do for Linux Matters. They'll just go straight into Linode's object storage, which is just S3, I think. And that seems to work reasonably well. But there's more work sort of up front for that, I think. It took them, because they, I think, took Hugo and Castanet and then had to sort of adapt it a little bit. And it was a lot of fucking around. Whereas just install WordPress, install a podcast plugin, upload your media to Libsyn. You could do it in a couple of hours, if that. But as always, there's a million ways to do it. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when it'll probably be news and stuff. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.